And now David will give us our scripture for this morning.
This morning's scripture is from Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Matthew, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. And so he paid the fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish to flee from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord sent out a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was in danger of being broken. Then the mariners were afraid and cried every man to his God, and they threw the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it. But Jonah had gone into the inner hold of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the captain came to him and said to him, Why are you sleeping? Arise, call upon your God. Perhaps God will deliver us, that we perish not. And they said, every one to his fellow, Come, let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell upon Jonah. Then they said to him, Tell us for what cause this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? From what place do you come? What is your country? And of what people are you? And Jonah said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who has made the sea and the dry land. And the men were exceedingly afraid, and said to him, What have you done? For the men knew that he had fled from the presence of the Lord. And when he told them everything, then they said to him, What shall we do to you that the sea may be calm for us? For behold, the sea continues to be more tempestuous against us. Jonah said to them, Take me up and cast me into the sea, so that the sea may be calm for you, for I know that for my sake this great tempest is upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship back to the land, but they could not, for the sea became more tempestuous against them. Therefore they cried to the Lord and said, We beseech thee, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not upon us innocent blood, for thou art the Lord, and hast done as it pleased thee. So they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. And the men were greatly terrified from the presence of the Lord, and they offered sacrifices of righteousness to the Lord, and made vows. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish, and it swallowed up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. And now Reverend Macaulay will give us our lesson sermon.
Well, this morning's lesson is on making a fresh start in the new decade. Well, here we are in the beginning of a new year, and moreover, a new decade. New opportunities come with the new decade to make a brighter future for everyone. The last 2 lessons I gave were on the same topics. It's Time to Wake Up was about noticing the wake-up calls that we get from time to time, either in the form of a death, a severe accident, or something that reminds us that our time here is limited and that it's time for us to make up, to make the most out of our time in this round of body. Then I spoke about the illusion of time and how time seems to go by very slowly when we're young and appears to go by faster and faster as we get older. There are lots of natural segues in life. We're born. At some point we begin to understand history. In looking at our view of the world, everything before our birth is ancient history. We hear our parents tell us that when they were young children, life was more difficult. But we're not interested in hearing about that because we weren't around. And their experience wasn't part of our experience. And come on, get with it. Times have changed, mostly for the better, and we don't have to walk 5 miles to school anymore. As for the natural segues in life, well, we're born, we get toilet trained, we learn to walk, we go off to school, we graduate from lower, middle, and upper schools. At some point we learn to drive, we go to college. Eventually we move out of our parents' home and make our own home. And if we're lucky, we find a partner, move into a larger home. We may have children, and find out that our children don't want to hear about ancient history. Lots of times in life there are natural segues or transitions from one chapter to the next. We move from one school to another, we move from one neighborhood to another, and make a fresh start. Changing jobs can give us a fresh start as well. Learning to drive changes us from being dependent upon others to being independent. All of those segues give us the opportunity to make a fresh start. But then sometimes we need a catalyst to stimulate that fresh start. I haven't changed jobs in over 20 years. I haven't moved to a new neighborhood in over 13 years. I wouldn't say that I'm bored with my job or my home. But this new decade does give the possibility of making a fresh start if I choose to do so. One thing I've noticed is that I've found myself eliminating clutter. So much of the stuff I've been holding on to, thinking I would need it someday, has turned out to be useless or of no value to me anymore. In fact, I realize that I'm paying a high price to store that stuff that I'm never going to use, and if I just let go of it, I'll have some more room at home and less stuff to worry about losing. In this morning's scripture, we heard the story of Jonah. We understand that Jonah received the word of the Lord, that Jonah was instructed to go to Nineveh and preach against the wickedness that had come before the Lord. Now, if you had a dream or a vision where God spoke to you and told you to make a particular journey or do a particular deed, how would you respond? Would you recognize the holy nature of that dream or vision and rise to the occasion, put all your plans on hold, and make that journey and do that deed, saying that my Father has asked me to do this, and therefore I must take leave of absence from my job or quit my job and go as my Father in heaven has commanded? Or would you do as Jonah did and board a ship and flee in the opposite direction? In thinking about that question, I wondered how many times I've done that very thing in my own life. How many times have I known what was the correct and proper road to take, and I chose to go the opposite direction? I imagine we've all faced that challenge at some point or another in our lives. The story goes on to say that after Jonah paid the fare and boarded the ship, the Lord sent out a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was in danger of being broken. They threw their treasures into the sea to lighten the ship. Jonah, in the meantime, went into the inner hold of the ship and went to sleep. Now, sleep is a good thing overall. Sleep allows the body to repair and restore itself. Too much sleep may not be healthy, especially if we're using sleep to avoid a problem, such as Jonah did on that ship. The captain woke Jonah and asked Jonah to pray that they be delivered and perish not. The sailors were smart enough to realize that the storm was a messenger of divine justice sent to someone on that ship. The men were afraid. They knew Jonah had fled from the presence of the Lord. So they cast Jonah into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Jonah was then swallowed up by a great fish and spent 3 days and nights in the belly of that fish. To nature, this was impossible, but to the God of nature, all things are possible. Upon first hearing this story, it seems unlikely the word of the Lord came to Jonah. How many of us have received the word of the Lord? In one moment, I could easily say that the word of the Lord has never come to me. After all, I've never seen the glowing presence of an angel before me, as I've read in descriptions in the Bible. On the other hand, I see examples of God's beauty before me every day.